I think it's brilliant because what it does is all of a sudden it brings intelligence in real time.
When I'm on that system, I pretty much always wake up with perfect blood sugar.
Well, I went back to insulin pens and I have used different types of insulin pens, different types of insulin.
Are you saying that every time I'm taking an injection, I should change this needle for every shot?
It's not the pump that's the problem, it's the insulin.
Have you ever wondered if insulin pumps are really better than insulin pens? I'm Tom.
And I'm Christel.
We both live with type 1 diabetes, and in this episode, we'll dive into the pros and cons of both. We share our experiences and reveal what works best for us. So whether you're a pump user or a pen fan or just curious, this episode is for you. Let's get started. So how are you doing, Christel?
I am really well, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you think this was a good intro?
I think that was an awesome intro.
All right. So today we really want to share a little bit more of our journey and how we manage our diabetes, how we get insulin to our body because we both need it. And I think our stories are very different from the perspective when we were diagnosed, but also what tools we manage. And I thought it might be fun to kind of talk about both ways of managing, but not give out right away what we use right now is what our preferred methods, so that, people can maybe guess what we're doing right now. If we're on a pen or on a pump, do you think that would work?
You can definitely do that, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey as well, Tom. So maybe what did you use when you were diagnosed? A little bit, what have you used over the years? And I'll, of course, also share mine, but just so we get kind of an idea of your vast experience.
Right. So when I was diagnosed, I was doing MDI. I had multiple daily injections. Back then, there were no insulin pumps anyway. And I think the insulin I was dosing back then was not the kind of insulin we have today. But I have a lot of experience with the pump because I went on an insulin pump when I was 12, which was almost 30 years ago. And since then, most of my time I was on insulin pumps. I started with Diabetic, which is a Swiss pump. Then I had all kinds of pump brands, Animus. I think I had Medtronic pump, and lately I had the T-Slim X2 and also Pump, which is I think not available in the US, only here in Europe. It's another Swiss pump from a company called Ypsomed. And lately I've been using Omnipod, both versions of Omnipod, Omnipod 5 and Omnipod Dash. But here and there, when I go on vacation, sometimes I'm on MDI as well. And lately I've been doing that MDI a little bit more. And I kind of find both of these methods of managing interesting and have their pros and cons. So we can talk more about that. But maybe you can share as well, what's your story, what's your history with, how you managed your type 1?
Sure. So I was diagnosed 97. So there are definitely insulin pumps, but I was started on insulin pens, so MDI, as you mentioned. And I was also started on some insulin that's not available today. It was one of those, like, the long-acting insulin, so the background insulin was one of those pens. It was like cloudy insulin and had a little plastic ball in it, and you kind of had to mix it before you use it. I have no clue what that was called, but it was a little bit more erratic than the newer insulins. So started with that, and also a rapid acting, so mealtime insulin that you had to space out. So you did have to eat at certain times. So it's very different insulin. I started with that and I was on that for a really, really long time. And then at one point I was like, hey, I want to try something else. I want to try looping, which is basically hybrid closed loop insulin pump, I guess. But I did the do-it-yourself version. I got an old Medtronic insulin pump. And I used it was called Riley Link. I don't know if that's even a thing anymore. But basically, you set up the algorithm, and then it kind of takes care of your insulin for you. And I tried that for a while, and I did love it. I know everyone I have ever talked to who've done it loved it. I did not love it, but that was kind of my only experience. I'm kind of giving away what I'm doing right now then. But that's my only experience with insulin pumps, and unfortunately, it wasn't super positive. And I went back to insulin pens, and I have used different types of insulin pens, different types of insulin, but we can get a little bit more into that shortly.
Yeah. And I think the way you did it is like very different than most people do it, because your first experience with insulin pump was the kind of tool that you used is like do it yourself algorithm. It's not something that you can just go to the doctor and they would prescribe you this, and you would go to the pharmacy and they would give you this kind of thing. It's something that was built by the type 1 community, and that requires a lot of work. Like you need to basically create your own algorithm and then install it on your phone, and it works with I think the rallying is still a thing. It's just that looping is now easier with some pumps. You don't need that too much of the technical equipment that maybe you needed when you tried. And I think you like jumped into it very deep. Like you went right away with the most challenging thing that there is. I think there's a lot of pumps that are a lot kind of easier to manage, but I understand.
Actually, I will say actually the building of the software, it was super easy. You just follow the recipe. So they were basically like, here's the code, put the code in the computer, and it built it. So the building the app was not hard. It was a plug and play. I would say using the pump was not hard either. My issue was a little different. Yeah, I feel like jumping ahead, but you are right. There are a lot of different pump options where your doctor prescribes a pump for you, and you basically get trained by a medical professional, and there's a lot of more hand holding.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking we could give like a little bit of an overview, like what is MDI and what is an insulin pump? Like what are the main differences for those who might not be like familiar with both of these tools? We don't want to give a lecture, but just like basic differences between these two. I think this topic is such a interesting and personal, because everyone who lives with type 1 might have a preference for one tool or the other and kind of be like used to it and a bit worried to maybe switch or try something new. So that's why I thought, we could then compare the pros and cons of these options, and kind of give people taste of what we experienced. But just for like as a baseline, because I'm not that familiar with MDI and the tools, because I don't, most of the time I was on insulin pump, I thought I would say, what MDI is, multiple daily injections, and how it works, or like what are the key pillars of this way of managing diabetes. And then you could add from your experience that is a lot more wide, and you just have so many more years of experience to add whatever I miss. And then you could say, or you could tell something about pumps, and then I can add on if you miss something. So let me go with MDI first. So I guess multiple daily injections, how most people use it is they take two types of insulin, and that's a big difference to the pump. We'll get to it. They take a long-lasting or basal or background insulin, which is the one that usually people take once or maybe twice a day. That kind of helps our body operate normally, but doesn't cover for food. And then there is other insulin, like the pre-meal insulin, which is usually much faster acting, not long lasting, but rapid acting or ultra rapid acting, that usually is injected before the meals and then covers for the meals, and is also used for any sort of corrections. I think that's like the general thought behind the MDI. And then one thing that I personally find like super interesting and important is to kind of understand what is the insulin active time, like when the insulin starts working when I inject it, when it has its peak, when it's most effective, and how long it stays in my body. I like to think about that because it really helps me manage my blood sugars. And there's a huge difference between long-lasting and rapid-acting insulin, because the long-lasting basically runs for a very long time, right? It starts working in 1 or 2 hours, and then depending on the type, it can work for 24 hours or even longer. There is no peak; it just works for a very long time, and then it wears off after one day, or even some of them even longer. But then the rapid acting ones, they usually have much shorter intervals, and they start working 15, 20 minutes, and then they have a peak in 1 hour or 1.5 hours, but that's where it hits the most to kind of cover the foods that we eat. After 3-4 hours, that insulin is usually out of our body. Some of them, there are some specific that can be slightly different, but like this general rule, I think that I like to always think about how much is still active, how much is, going to work soon, or I just like to think about that in this way, and it helps me a lot on MDI to manage. And on pump, this is kind of different. Like we don't we don't think about it exactly like that, and that's why I wanted to describe the difference. I hope I'm not turning this too much into lecture, but did I forget something about MDI that you think is important as
I
a
would add
is
to
like
this is that some of the long-acting insulins, to your point, some of them are 24 hours-ish. Some of them are a little shorter, depending on how fast people metabolize them. But a lot of them actually do have a little bit of a peak, even though they're long-acting. So for example, one of the insulins that are really well used in the US, which is Lantus, I don't know how well used it is in Europe, but it does have a little bit of a peak. So it's something to be mindful of, just because if it tends to peak, let's say 8 hours, after 8 hours, then you probably don't want to dose it so that it's like that 8 hours is 3 a.m. in the morning and you go low. So there's some things to think about there.
Yes, that's a good point. Actually, I've used Lantus before, and I noticed like 7 or 8 hours after I inject it, it works a little bit more. That's maybe why Lantus is not my favorite, although I used it, because it's not exactly straight line how I said a long-lasting insulin would be.
Talks inhaled insulin as well, or do you think that is outside of our scope today?
I mean, why not? We're not giving any medical advice, but I think officially the inhaled insulin is meant for MDI people who are on injections. I don't even know if it's actually approved for someone who's wearing an insulin pump, but I think it's a great tool in the toolkit to have. That's actually, even from my experience, even faster than the rapid acting insulin like Novorapid or Humalog, or even ultra rapid acting like the Fiaspor Lumjev. The inhaled insulin I used, Afrezza, I think it's called, actually it starts working super fast, I feel like, and it also has the peak very early. For me, it was, I don't know, 45 minutes, even not even an hour, and it would already work really effectively, and it would also be out of my body. I could see, like, after maybe 2.5 hours, if I remember correctly, I would basically be clean from that dose that I took. So it was, I think it's sometimes really helpful to use, especially on MDI, when you want to eat something that has a lot of sugar, like like a lot of carbs, and just will spike your blood sugar. That I like to use Afrezza a lot for that kind of meals.
Anyway, I was like, wait, what inhaled insulin? What are we talking about here? I believe right now it's only widely available in the US. So it's not something everyone has access to. It's still a prescription insulin. So you still need to talk to your doctor. You need to have some different tests done to see if your lung capacity is going to be okay. How long it stays in the body actually depends on the dose. So that's different set doses, and the smallest dose is only in the body for 90 minutes, where some of the larger ones stays in the body for longer. But I figured you're right. You're not going to use that in an insulin pump at all. It's just when we talk about MDI, it's now part of the MDI bucket in my world, at least.
I also tried to use it with insulin pump, but it's a bit complex, because the pump obviously doesn't know if you inject or if you take inhaled insulin outside of the pump algorithm or the pump software. The pump has no idea. So always adding insulin externally with the pump is a bit tricky, but something that I also did.
But wait, if you're on an insulin pump and you do like manual injection for whatever reason, maybe you're not sure your insulin pump is working correctly, and you're doing like a manual injection just to see if that's the case. Can you still enter that insulin into the pump somehow? Say, hey, I took 2 units, just not by you. Can you do that on any of the pumps?
I think most systems that are commercial systems, you can't really do it, because it's I think it would be too risky for the manufacturer to like allow you to dose externally. But with the DYI system, you actually can do it. That there is a way to do it. But again, this is not regulated, and we're going, I think, super nitty gritty now. So let's not let Christel. Do you want to talk about like
Right.
insulin pump and explain like what is the how it works?
I'll do my best. So, okay, so insulin pump is an insulin delivery device, right? So basically, there in the space form, I would say there's two forms. There is either a little pump that is tethered, so you have an infusion set on your body, and then it's connected to this little pump that delivers insulin 24/7. Or you can have something that's called a patch pump, which sits directly on the body. Same thing, it delivers insulin. So the big difference between MDI and an insulin pump is that it's only the rapid acting insulin that's in the insulin pump, and the insulin pump then drips tiny bits of insulin into your body 24/7, kind of mimicking what a healthy pancreatic system is doing. So if it's not automated, we'll talk about automated in a second. If it's not automated, that means that your doctor and you will set different basal rates. So that's different rates for how much insulin you need throughout the day. And it will simply deliver that insulin, making sure that you have that background insulin all the time. And then whenever you eat or make corrections, you simply type into your pump saying, hey, I'm eating, let's say 10 grams of carbs. And based on your settings, it will then deliver a bolus. So you never have to get out an insulin pen, anything like that. The pump does it for you. So traditionally, you've just had all your settings going, and then once in a while, you change the settings. So the newer thing is the hybrid closed loop pumps.
So before you go into hybrid closed loop, I just wanted to say one more thing. With the MDI, you always need to inject yourself when you want insulin. Like the pump is connected to you, so you just need to push a button and you can get insulin in. So it's kind of automated in the way of like pricking yourself. You don't need to do that, but you still need to kind of do things manually. But it's a lot easier because you don't need to do multiple shots. You just do one shot per every 3 days when you change your site. And that's it. I think that's a big difference. But I'll let you go with the hybrid closed loop now.
No. Actually, I think that's a good point because, as I said, you change the infusion set or you change the pod every 3 days. I believe there's a new infusion set that's 4 days that just got approved. So for some of the insulin pumps, you can even wear it for 4 days without having to change it. Right?
Yes, I heard of Medtronic trying to develop 7-day, and I'm not sure if it's already on the market. But I mean, I might be wrong. But there is definitely efforts to make this side change less often. They're trying to develop this kind of cannulas. Yeah.
Same thing with the patch pump. I mean, it's meant to be worn for 3 days. I think some people wear it off label for longer, but you're not supposed to do that. That's kind of the basics of a pump, I would say, is that it takes care of things for you. It's automated. You don't have to think about remembering your doses and all that. So the hybrid closed loop pump, which I just talked about, it's a little different in the sense it's still the basic pump, but it's connected to a continuous glucose monitor, so a CGM, which is a little device that sits on your body. It has a little sensor that sits underneath the skin and measures your blood sugars, and that communicates with the insulin pump. And this is brilliant. I could say I think it's brilliant because what it does is all of a sudden it brings intelligence in real time to the pump. It's like, hey, Tom or Christel, blood sugars are about to go low. Let's pull back on the insulin. Let's not give them as much. Or, hey, their blood sugar's about to rise. Let's give them a little bit more. So it's actively adjust your insulin for you. And that can significantly, for a lot of people, reduce highs and lows. You still have to do the bolus if you're eating. If you're eating, you still have to push the button and say, hey, I'm eating 20, 40, whatever grams of carbs. And there's a lot of really cool new pumps out there. There is some hybrid closed loop pump where you don't even have to do carb counting anymore. You just say, hey, I'm eating a meal. It's big. And then you push the button. And also, if you don't calculate your carbs right, well, the pumps go in and they kind of adjust. So I think they're brilliant. I'm happy to tell you a little later on why I don't use one, although I think they're brilliant, but it's really come far, I'd say. And most of these CGMs, those should change every 1 week to 2 weeks, depending on which model you use. But, I mean, all you have to do is change your devices and fill the pump with insulin. But that's all you have to do. There's no day-to-day injections. I think that's one of the big things. You
Yeah.
wanna add anything to that?
No, I think as a general description, this is great. We can go maybe one by one then with things like what do we see a pro or a con, and one of them would be obviously that with a pen you need to inject yourself multiple times a day. You need to give yourself the injections. You feel the needle multiple times a day, and with a pump you don't feel it. So when I have a pump on, it's doing these microdoses every 3-5 minutes, delivering this little tiny bit of insulin, which is kind of like the baseline insulin that goes into my body. I don't really feel it. Like, I don't know that something is going into my body. I don't need to stab myself with a needle. Of course, I feel it when I put the cannula in, and that's actually with, I guess, all the pumps I ever used. It's just a little bit more painful than taking an injection, because that needle is just bigger, because you need to get the cannula under the skin, and there's just a little bit more painful than an injection. But as you said, you only need to do it once in 3 days, let's say, assuming nothing happens and you don't need to change the cannula more frequently. Some people leave it longer. I also have done it. I was talking last time about my teenage years and wild experiences during that time. So of course I change every 3 days was not exactly on top of my list. But the problem is then if you don't do it, then the insulin absorption can be impacted, and maybe that takes us to one of the potential disadvantages of the pump, because when you have that cannula under your skin and something goes wrong, it gets bent, or the insulin is not getting absorbed properly from that spot, and that just happens. Like, I used the pump for so many years, and it just happens. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it happens, and then you just see your blood sugar going up, and then you give yourself some correction bolus, and it's just not working because the delivery is not 100%. And I think that doesn't happen really with an insulin pen, does it? That you take a injection and the insulin doesn't work.
I mean, it kinda can, but not to the same degree. I think what you're talking about is basically you think you're getting insulin, but you're not for whatever reason. I mean, it can be occlusion, there can be a lot of different things going on, right? So I think for injections, if you don't, like, prep your pen, if you don't do an air shot first, so you wanna flick your pen, you wanna make sure that insulin is actually coming out of that needle. If you don't do that, then you might not actually be injecting insulin. And I also know a lot of people, and I also do this sometimes, who don't change the needle every time. And if you don't change the needle every time and you then don't do an air shot, there's a high likelihood of it being clogged, or or that you're injecting air, because a lot of air will get into the insulin pen. So I'd say there's room for error in both of them. My One of the biggest downsides I do see to the pump in regards to this specific topic is that, let's say that you're sleeping, let's say that you're not wearing a CGM, so you're not being alerted of high blood sugars, and you're not actually getting insulin. There's a real risk when you're on a pump for DKA, so diabetes ketoacidosis, because basically if you're not getting insulin for, is it 3 hours or more, then your risk of going into DKA is heightened, because back to what you said earlier, rapid acting insulin only lasts in the body, 3 to 5 hours. So if you have absolutely no insulin in the body, you're at risk. I know this is a small risk, but it's there. If you have a long acting insulin going, if you injected a long acting insulin within the last 24 hours, your risk of DKA is very, 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 very minor. So I think that's one of the big ones is, do you trust your tech, right? And
Yeah.
I want
I mean,
to
there is
fail.
like in what you said in those few sentences, there's like 5 things I would like to talk about more, like double click and like open that. So first, as a long time pump user, I just want to say I did not have this happen to me, that I would have cannula malfunction at night and then I would wake up and I would need to go to the hospital. It never happened to me. It did happen to me that I woke up in the morning or I woke up with alarms and I saw my CGM graph is just going up and I'm at 200 or 300 and it's been rising for a few hours, but I didn't know about it. I was sleeping. Maybe the alarm didn't wake me up. So that did happen, and it was not only once. It happened over the years many times, but it's still a very rare event. So I think just when you said it, I was worried it might scare some people, and I think we don't want to scare some people. It's just like something that happens not very often. It's very rare. But more interesting what you were saying about changing needles. So because I also have insulin pens, obviously sometimes I use them. So are you saying that every time I'm taking an injection, I should change this needle, like for every shot? Is this the right thing? Okay. Okay, good to know. I don't always do it. I change it like once in 3 days, maybe. It's I guess not the right thing to do then.
I mean, so first of all, just do you feel discomfort when you're injecting after 3 days? Is it harder to get the needle in through the skin?
Yes, when I feel discomfort, that's when I change it. When it starts hurting too much, but I think my threshold for pain is quite high.
Funny. So there's a few things, right? I mean, one thing is what we're supposed to do, and then there's what we do. So, I mean, what I do, and again, this is not medical advice, this is just what Christel does. So I take my rapid acting insulin for every meal as well as for corrections. I put a new needle on in the morning. I use it throughout the day. I find that it starts to become dull after like 3 or 4 injections. If that happens, I'll change it again. So I maybe change that one once or twice a day. My long-acting insulin, I put on a new needle, I take my injection, I take the needle off.
Okay. Wow.
So for that one, I changed it every time. This is also, and I'm in the States, I'm in the US. This is easy for me to say because I have pretty good insurance coverage for needles. I also understand that some people do not. If you do not have good coverage, I totally understand that you're trying to extend the lifetime of your insulin pen needles. I would say that be mindful if you do that again, air comes into the pen. So you do want to make sure that, get the air out of the pen so that you're not just injecting air. I can tell you air is not going to lower your blood sugars. And also just make sure that insulin is flowing. So that means, again, flicking it, do an air shot. Maybe it's just half or whole unit just to see that insulin is actually coming out of the pen. Because if the insulin is not coming out, again, it's got to lower your blood sugars. You're going to get really frustrated and
Yeah.
blood sugars.
Yeah. No, it's. I guess I should do it more often because clearly I'm just doing it. I mean, my needles are covered by insurance, so I guess I should do it more often, and that's maybe like a learning point for me, for me because I really don't do it very much.
I highly recommend everyone to go online and Google what does an insulin pen needle look like after a few uses. It is interesting. Maybe it'll motivate you. I don't know.
Yeah.
It gets really banged up.
Okay. So one more thing was about the air bubbles. So when you change the needle, you were saying after each needle change, you should check, you should get any air bubbles out and just make sure that the insulin is coming out of the insulin pen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Good. So that's, I guess, an advantage of the pump because
I was just saying that if I don't visually see any air bubbles or anything like that, an air shot for me can also just be push the plunger a little bit because sometimes then a tiny drop will come out and then I'm not wasting half a unit on like air shot. But I know that insulin is flowing.
right. And actually, one more thing, when I'm taking a shot with this pen, I noticed, and you will probably know what the right answer is, but I honestly don't know this. So I noticed when I take that shot, sometimes I take the needle out of my body, and there will be like a little drop of insulin on that needle, which clearly didn't go in. And so when I take like really small dose, like 1 unit, I feel like, okay, this is my 1 unit here, and it just didn't go in, it came out. And then I noticed when I keep the needle, like I push the button, I get the insulin in, but then I leave the needle in my body for, I don't know, 5-10 more seconds. There is never any drop, and it feels like everything really went in. So is it also like important to keep the needle in your body for long enough so that you get all the insulin in?
Yeah. You're nail on the head on that one. You're supposed to hold in the needle tip underneath the skin for, I think it's a 5 count, 2 or 5 count, because to your point, if you just inject and then pull out the needle, might not see as much insulin has been absorbed. I will say sometimes though, there's gonna be a little bit dripping from the needle regardless, and I wouldn't freak out too much about that. That doesn't mean that you didn't get a dose. It just, again, there's pressure on the pen.
Right. I mean, it's crazy when you're on. I'm sure they told me this when I first was diagnosed, but then you spend a long time on the pump, and then you go back to MDI and nobody teaches you these basics, and then I'm realizing like how many things I'm actually doing wrong. So it's really good to talk to you about this. I feel like I'm gonna learn a lot. Okay.
I mean, the whole air bubble thing for an insulin pump, you do have to do something with the cannula, right? I mean, because there's gonna be air in the cannula
Yeah.
initially.
Yes. So with the pump, you fill your cannula, and that's usually guided by the pump. So there is a screen tells you, do this, now deliver 10 units. It's kind of half automated. You need to press some buttons, but the pump will kind of tell you what you need to do. And usually it's designed in a way that it's safer, that it feels safer and it needs to be, that like a lot of insulin ends up wasted, but the pump will not let you do anything without not really making sure that cannula is full of insulin. There are no air bubbles. Obviously, you need to make sure there are no air bubbles in your cartridge. So if this is a pump where you fill a cartridge manually, this is something you kind of need to do in a similar way that you do it with insulin pen. But once you do it once, and then for the whole cycle until you change your site again, you're basically covered, because there is no, all the insulin is going in your body. So unless there is some malfunction with the cannula or something like that, or occlusion, then there should be no air bubbles in the system.
So that's actually, I kind of like what you said. Double click on this. Let's double click on that. The lost insulin. So do you lose a lot of insulin generally? I mean, is that you kind of have to let some go through the cannula? How about if you don't use your insulin cartridge up? Will you have to just discard that insulin as well? Or how does that work?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot depends on the type of pump you use, but with every pump, there is a lot of wasted insulin. It's just facts. If you follow the instructions, if you follow the user manual, you will end up with a lot of insulin wasted. Because every time you change an infusion site or you should refill your cartridge, you should basically dispose of anything old and just get a new cartridge, new cannula, fresh insulin going in. So whatever is not used from the previous cartridge, you should not use. I can, again, honestly say I'm probably not doing it right, but most of the time I just use insulin multiple times because I know it's not expired after 3 days. It's not what you should do, but I just hate throwing half of my insulin away if I have an issue with my pump. So I just try to use most of that insulin as I can, but it's, if I go by the book, I should not do that. So the pod pump, like Omnipod, for example, you fill it up. You need to kind of estimate, or you should estimate how much insulin you will need for those 3 days. You put a little bit extra as a buffer, and then you put the pump on. But when you dispose the pump, you should throw out the insulin that's left. Here you can do like a little bit DIY solution, like you take an injection and you pull it back and you put it in your next pod, but you should not do that. And the same thing you can do with a tube pump. You can basically pull out the insulin of the cartridge or reuse the cartridge, but it's not what you should do. So please don't do it because I told you that I do it. But I would say, like, my estimate would be like 10, maybe 15% of insulin with the pump is simply wasted because of these side change processes.
I'm fascinated that it actually works for you to pull it out, because I believe that and I could be wrong, but I believe that one of the reasons why we're also told to change or to throw out the cartridges is that they're plastic, right? And plastic insulin, how do you say, insulin dies in plastic? That's also why insulin is usually, you know, in glass containers, is that plastic breaks down, is a better word than die. It breaks down insulin. So I guess that is one of the reasons. I think there's also something with like a risk of infections and stuff like that. But you don't even know how long it takes, if you have something in the plastic container for it to start to get bad or not work as well. I guess if Medtronic is working on a 7-day plastic container, then 7 days should be fine.
I have no idea. I didn't even know, to be honest, that insulin expires faster in a plastic container compared to glass container. I had no idea about this. So um, again, I'm learning something new. Again, nobody should do it the way I do it, I guess. That's the conclusion.
The reason why I got onto this with the glass versus plastic was that I dropped one of my pen fills. And I was so sad because I dropped it and it broke, and my insulin was obviously it was on the floor, so not useful. And I was so depressed and I was so sad. And I, poured my heart out on social media. I was like, oh my God, why don't they just put it in plastic containers? I'm like, how hard can this be? And a lot of people who clearly knows more than me were like, well, Christel, the reason is that, it won't last as long as in a plastic container. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll just stop complaining. But yeah, it's interesting. I do think that, so one of the reasons why I think insulin pumps are brilliant, I want to go back to why I actually think it's brilliant, although I can probably say it now a lot. I'm not using an insulin pump. I've only used one, and there was a reason why I didn't continue doing that. But I think they're really brilliant for a lot of reasons. I think if you're not willing to take a lot of injections, then that is the way to go. Because not taking insulin is not an option. So this is a way of managing blood sugars without having to doing a lot of injections. I think that if you are someone where diabetes just takes up too much mental space, then there are some insulin pumps that are some really, really good options because they can take a little bit of the heat off. And I think that some people, especially with the hybrid closed loop, can achieve a level of blood sugar control that they can't on MDI, but with less effort. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I agree. I mean, the studies that the pump companies like to publish is that you can achieve better control on a pump, like you can have better HbA1c, you can have a higher time in range. Like they look at sample or like certain number of participants and they measure it. Of course, it's when the study is done by the pump company, you always have to consider that. But I think it's like the general belief that with an automated insulin delivery system, people can achieve like statistically better control. Maybe not everyone, but I would add one more advantage of a pump, which I think is a big one, especially a pump with automated insulin delivery, and that the one that is connected to a continuous glucose monitor is overnight and like morning blood sugars, because
yes,
99% of the cases you will have no issue with your cannula, and the pump will basically look at your blood sugar every 5 minutes. The algorithm will check, okay, the blood sugar every 5 minutes, and then it will increase or decrease the dose. So in this automated mode. And so when I'm on that system, I pretty much always wake up with perfect blood sugar because the pump will do all the heavy lifting during the night when I sleep and when I cannot do anything. And I almost always wake up with pretty much perfect blood sugar. And that's, just like 1/3 of my time I sleep. So it's like 1/3 of the time that counts into my HbA1c or time in range is pretty much covered because I cannot mess up when I sleep and the pump does the job and I wake up with perfect blood sugar. And that I think it's a huge help. And also what you mentioned, it just takes away a lot of work from my plate. So when I'm in a meeting or I'm busy the whole morning or the whole afternoon, I don't have time to deal with my, CGM, measure my blood sugar or whatever. I just don't feel like doing it. The pump will dose to help me like under reasonable control, even if I do like literally nothing. I just need to bolus before I eat. But the pump will do a lot. Like I can have zero involvement and I will still not go out of range like completely crazy. But with MDI, I would. But there's always a but. There is a lot of extra things you kind of need to do with the pump that are sort of that might be annoying, and for me the most annoying thing about pump is to always carry supplies with me. In case my cannula fails, I should always have a cannula on me or spare pod to replace that pod that failed. When I go on vacation, I I should bring a plan B. I should not only have the one pump, but if something happens with the pump, I should have a spare pump, or I should anyway have injections that I can inject myself manually if the pump fails. So the amount of things I should carry with me every day and for every vacation is just like insane. It's a lot more than with a pen. And that's like why I like to go sometimes with this for vacation, because I don't have to worry about it too much. I know that it will just work. It's like simple. It's not very sophisticated, but it will work. I work it out, and I don't have to worry about all the supplies, if you know what I mean. So I don't know how you feel about that, Christel, if that's one of the reasons why you would choose this as well.
Not so much. I would say so. Again, double clicking. So back to your point about waking up in range. That is for the overnight management is one of the only reasons why I've considered going back on an insulin pump, because I'm sleeping. I'm not going to manage my blood sugars. Right. So having some sort of automation would be amazing. There is a pump on the horizon that I can't wait for that to come out, something called Luna, which is exactly that. It's just for nighttime. They're not, I don't think they're super close to FDA approval, but I follow them very closely because I'm like, I want that. I want that product. And so whenever that comes out, or hopefully we'll be the first one to test it, because the overnight is challenging because I'm sleeping. I don't find day-to-day challenging. What I found challenging on a pump is that I'm a very active person. I think anyone who knows me knows that unless when I'm working, sitting down working, I'm on my feet and I'm running around, I'm at the gym, I'm going for walks. And I found that to be extremely complicated with an insulin pump, in the sense that rapid acting insulin, so mealtime insulin, gets impacted by activity. Background insulin, so I've been using Levemir for a lot of years. Levemir just got discontinued. That was hard to say. Discontinued, so I'm trying something new now. But that does not get impacted by activity. Okay, so we now have two scenarios. We have rapid-acting insulin going 24/7 versus a background insulin like Levemir, and then occasionally like some rapid-acting insulin. I found that I had to discontinue my pump or go in exercise mode constantly in order to manage my blood sugars for an active lifestyle. So I found that it was very, very challenging. It was a lot of work. And that frustrated me. And I was low pretty much all the time. And in the end, I was like, this is not for me. I actually my solution was only to use it at night for a long time to get exactly what I'm trying to get out of that lunar pump. It was just, I didn't want to run around with an infusion set in the body 24/7 if I was only, actually using the pump for 8 hours a day or during the night. And it became so complicated. I was like, okay, never mind. Let me put this aside again. It was an interesting experiment, but the amount of effort that I was putting in for worse results was not worth it. And it's interesting because I was discussing it with my endocrinologist. My endocrinologist and I, we talk about pretty much everything. So she knew I was doing this project. And she's like, why? Why are you doing this? Your blood sugars are great. You're pretty much, achieving the best results for you with an insulin pump. Why are we doing this? I was like, well, I'm trying to optimize. And I think that's just, I was trying something new. And
Right.
it wasn't the right thing for me.
Yeah. And I completely understand your point about active lifestyle and insulin pump, because it can get super tricky. Exactly as you said, when you have rapid acting insulin that is active in your body, and you go for a walk, or if you go for a run, it's like multiplied by 2. It's like pouring gas in the fire. Like you have a fire going and you just pour gas. That's how I think about it. Like I have some rapid acting insulin on board, and I go for a run with a friend, and my blood sugar like goes like, I don't even know how to. It's like when you throw a stone, it just falls down like this. It tanks that's the word. It's crazy, and that does not need to be too much of the rapid acting insulin. It can be, I can even eat a dinner, do like a pre-dinner dose, and 1 hour after dinner I would start running, but I crash like immediately, and that's why it's difficult when your background insulin is also rapid acting. and you make a spontaneous decision to go for a walk or run, you're not able to take that insulin away from your body, and you just know you will be crashing and you need to eat. Like my strategy is I need to eat to compensate for that, and that requires a lot of carbohydrates that I would need to eat before going for a run, and that's sort of annoying. So I ended up like telling my friend, okay, let's do these runs at a specific time because we go after dinner, but I don't want to go too early after dinner. I want to go when I'm pretty much clean from that rapid acting insulin. And on top of that, I will activate activity mode on my pump like an hour before I go for that run, which will again like reduce that amount of rapid acting insulin in my body. And I still need to eat a little bit, otherwise I would crash because there is still some rapid acting left. And on the other hand, when I end the run, suddenly I have like zero insulin in me, and that's where I need that insulin. So I do like a micro bolus after the run. So it's like a lot of management around physical activity, like cardio kind of thing. When I go to the gym, it's not such a problem, but when I lift weights, it's not a problem. But when I go for a run or for a walk and I do it spontaneously, it's always a challenge. And I think that's something that you cannot, there's no way to eliminate that or get rid of that challenge with the kind of insulins we use now in insulin pumps. I don't know if you can think of anything else, but I tried so many things and
There.
yeah.
No, it was exactly that. It's not the pump that's the problem. It's the insulin.
Right.
I think the insulin pumps are brilliant, but the insulin we have available is just not fast enough. It lasts too long in the system. And
Right.
yeah, that is
But the funny thing is,
main
the long lasting insulin doesn't do that, right? Because you dose it once or twice a day, and it works as a background insulin. But when you go for a walk, at least when I go for a walk or run, it doesn't seem to have that pouring all in the fire effect like the rapid acting has. So that's why with the pumps with the pens, it's just so much easier to do these kind of activities. I don't know why, but it seems to be that way for me.
I found the same thing. And it's interesting. I have an acquaintance who ran marathons. I think he still does. And we had this discussion, and he was on an insulin pump, and he was having so many troubles. And we were kind of having this discussion. And I was like, I find that, with just a long acting insulin, I don't see those drops. He switched over to MDI, I think only for his marathons. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going low for like, I don't know how long they run, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, however long. So I don't think it's just us. I do think there's a lot of ways that you can deal with exercise on an insulin pump. But to your point, it's really hard to be spontaneous because we only have two levers, right? We can do the move on the carbohydrates or on the insulin. But if the insulin is already injected, there's not much you can do. So the only thing you can do is either postpone your activity or you can eat more carbohydrates to balance out your blood sugars, which I think, as you said, can be really annoying because it's like, I just want to go for a walk. Why do I have to eat 10 grams of carbohydrates? So especially if you just eaten once. But in general, if you're planning for exercise, and this is something I've talked a lot about in the past as well, if you're planning for exercise, you have to think about when is the insulin peaking. So you definitely don't want to do your activity when the insulin is peaking. So that 1 hour to 1.5 hour after inject it, you don't want to be out on your run right then because that's when the insulin is at its strongest. And then you're moving, increasing your insulin sensitivity. All that glucose is going to be pulled out of your bloodstream super fast. And those people will go low, right? So planning. So you might have to plan 2 hours before you run. Oh, yeah, for me, it was too much work. And there was not really enough benefit because the only time I was really see the benefit would be overnight. But for the remaining time of the day, I was fighting that thing, and it was no pretty.
Yeah, I understand. On the other hand, I worked a corporate job for a long time, and it's a big difference when you sit in the office like the whole day, and then when you have a weekend day, and then you basically more active. And I think with the pump, this is so much easier to regulate, or even during the day, if you have morning sitting in the office and afternoon, maybe running some errands, it's like so much easier to change that dose, within that day. You can have double the insulin in the morning when you're sitting in the office, and you can reduce that insulin by 50% in the afternoon when you are more active. And you can do it instantly, and within 1-2 hours, that change will basically reflect. So as long as you do it early enough and you do a little bit of planning, it's super easy to manage these kind of things. With long-lasting insulin, you kind of need to decide, in the morning or in the evening, what you will be doing the next day and how much background insulin you want to have. And you cannot, once you inject it, it's there. You cannot change it. So I think the benefit of the pump for someone who's not super active is clearly, you can step on the gas with the insulin, and you can get more insulin in the body almost instantly when you know that you will be sitting in a cinema or in the office for the next 3-4 hours.
I think that's a great point as well. When we talk about long-acting insulins, not all long-acting insulins are the same, right? So some of them are really long. Some of them are up to like 42 hours, which, I mean, I would never be on because I need more flexibility than that. But if your dates are really, really, the same, and you do a lot of the same routine over and over again, then you might benefit for something that's just really long-acting. Whereas the long-acting insulin I use right now is around 24 hours, which is still a little bit too long, in my opinion. To your point, like, I have to plan ahead. I have to, in the morning when I take it, I have to be like, okay, what's going to happen the next 24 hours? Do I need to dial it up and down? I don't think most people actively change their long-acting as much as I do, though. I think most people are in one set dose, and then they just go from there, actively make a decision on how much to take every day.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, insulin pump way more flexible in that sense.
Yeah. I would be curious to hear from you, how much you changed that long lasting. But previously you made a point about, I think we totally skipped that point, and it should have been probably somewhere at the beginning. Like, one of the things about the pump, you kind of need to have it on you 24/7. You cannot simply leave it at home. Or if you leave it at home and you are gone all day, you will have big problem because there is no insulin in your body. And sometimes when I'm using this, sometimes I just forget it at home because I'm so used to having the pump on me that I don't remember to take my pen, and I forgot. Okay, so I forgot I don't have the pump on me, and I need to take this with me. But the pump, on one hand, you need to be connected to it. It bothers me from time to time. I don't really want to have it always on me, but on the other hand, I never forget it. So it's it can be a pro, it can be a con, but it's just when you forget the pump at home, that's a big problem. And that happened to me too. When I took a shower, I disconnected from a tube pump, and then I went to work, and I didn't realize I don't have it until I wanted to bolus, and it was before lunch, and then I realized I'm really high because I had the alarm muted for some meetings or whatever. So yeah, that's okay. That's just, I don't know.
But things happen. I mean, I've forgotten my insulin pen twice in my life.
Only twice.
Yes, twice. But this has also been my routine since 97. Routines are, solid, I think, because I haven't been switching so much back and forth. It's so ingrained in me. Also, I always carry a purse. I know not all men do it that way. It's one of those things. So I have what I call my little go kit, and I know to put it in my purse. So for that, I have a very, very strong routine. I have forgotten my long-acting insulin more than once. And that's kind of like, I think that's where routine is working against me, in the sense that sometimes I'm like, yeah, I totally took my long-acting insulin. And then I'm like, was that today or was it yesterday? And you have these grandpa moments where like, did I do? So actually what's really cool, and I want to bring this up. This is not to endorse a product, but it kind of sounds like I am, because I'm always talking about this product and I love it, and I don't work with them. But I have the Smart Pen, the InPen from Medtronic, and that is brilliant. So I'm going to tell you what it is in a second, but it also has a reminder. So it will pop up and say, hey, remember to take your long-acting insulin. So that's been a reminder for me. I've had quite a few times where I'm like, did I take it? Did I not take it? I go in, I have an app, and I can see, if I clear the alert, then yes, I took it, right? But back to the smart pen. So the InPen is, there are other smart pens available. There's some from Novo Nordisk, but this is by far the best in my opinion. It's not widely available. I think it's mainly a US thing still, unfortunately, but it has a lot of the pump functionality, but in a pen format. So it doesn't deliver
It is,
it doesn't automatically deliver insulin, obviously.
and it is available in Europe as well. Just
It is full.
I have it right here.
Oh, yes, I see it.
I just did the video on YouTube about this, and that one was sponsored, but this podcast is not sponsored. So just so that it's clear, I was showing it here, but it's a good tool, and I think InPen might not be the only smart pen on the market. I don't have that much experience with anything else, but it's what you use and what I used. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the Nova pens. They don't have quite the same functionality. So InPen, I think, is brilliant because it keeps track of your doses automatically Bluetooth. So whenever you take a dose with your pen, it automatically Bluetooth it to the app. The app keeps track of your IOBs, active insulin on board. So back to what we talked about before is, if I can go into the app and see, hey, Christel, you have 2 units of active insulin, I should probably not go for a run without maybe eating a little bit of carbohydrates, right? And I really like the bolus calculator as well. So if you have an insulin pump, you most likely have gone in and say, hey, I'm eating 10 grams of carbs, and then it calculates your dose, you push the button. This app does the same thing, right? It says, I put in my blood sugar, I put in my carbs, and it'll tell me how much insulin to take. I don't have to do it, but it'll give a suggestion. So I think it's really brilliant.
I think the active insulin on board is just the best feature of the smart pen. It's something that, when you don't have that, you're kind of blind, and like I also don't remember sometimes, like when I took the dose, like was it 2 hours ago, 1 hour ago, 3 hours, like did I take it at all? Sometimes I don't even know. It even happened to me, I snooze that alert, or like turn off that alert for the long lasting, and then I'm not really sure if I took that long lasting or not. I think that's the old age dementia coming to me, but having the ability to lock this with the pen is great, because the pump locks everything for you. Like you cannot forget, because everything gets locked automatically. But with a smart pen, or like a smart app that's connected to a pen, regardless of what brand it is, I think it's a great feature. And what I was told is not many people who are on MDI use this kind of product, and I think I don't know why. I wonder why they don't do it, but I think it's such a great thing to have for someone on MDI, because it makes my life when I was on MDI so much easier.
Absolutely. I don't think people know about it, or my voice just disappeared, because every time I talk about it, and since that's what I've been using for a while, every time I talk about it, people are like, what is that? Where can I get it? So it is a prescription device, at least here in the US. So you do need to get a prescription from your doctor. I found that a lot of insurance companies do cover it. If your insurance company is not covering it, it is very expensive. I think they have some programs, but I would start with checking out if insurance covers it.
And I know that,
And I'm gonna like.
and I know when I posted that video, there are a lot of people from Canada asking if it's available in Canada. I think this one specifically is not. It's only in Europe and Middle East and US right now. So Canada, I know people from Canada and Australia always complain they get everything last, which I feel really sorry. I don't know why that is, why the companies cannot have it in Canada if they have it in the US. I don't understand how it works. But you would have thought it's not that difficult to ship it to Canada, but it seems probably because of some regulation or company strategies is not always the case. So I apologize to everyone in Canada who wants to ask. It's not in Canada, at least in Japan. Maybe some other is. So it's definitely worth exploring. I didn't do that.
Yeah. No, that's a really new invention as well for MDI. We haven't had anything. I mean, we went from syringes to pre-filled pens, and then kind of all the product development seemed to stop there until a few years ago, and we got. No, that's actually not true. There was NovaPen Echo, which I had maybe I don't want to say 15, 16 years ago. I don't know if you ever heard about that one. So that was also a pen, not a pre-fill pen, a durable pen, and has like a little tiny disc in the end, and it'll usually show you, hey, you took a unit 2 hours ago.
Okay, well, that's
It's basic, but I mean that was kind of the first step, and I thought it was really good.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So what other points should we bring up? Like when it comes to insulin pump management versus insulin pen, what else should we bring up? I feel we spoke quite highly about MDI, and we criticize insulin pumps maybe a little bit more than they deserve, especially me, because and maybe we get to also sharing our like preference. My personal preference in general, I guess it's insulin pump. I just feel for me it's a better option. I'm lucky because I have insurance coverage, so I can have automated insulin delivery system, and I don't pay too much more out of pocket compared to if I was using like MDI. So I'm lucky, but I think that factor of overnight and that factor of automated system that adjusts the background insulin all the time, for me just outweighed some of the things I don't like that much, to such an extent that I don't, I just don't think I can manage so well and so conveniently with MDI. And maybe MDI is convenient to some extent, but I just don't like the fact that I guess I'm not diligent enough. I could manage better on MDI, but just not diligent enough. And sometimes the pump steps in more aggressively when I'm not so disciplined on my end, and fixes the major issue I would have on MDI. So I guess that's the main reason why I go with insulin pump. And I kind of like also like how many models are now coming up, and there are different options. And it's probably not the topic today, maybe for another like episode, but to kind of compare, because each model has benefits and drawbacks, and I think there is something for everyone in the pump world. And it's just worth diving deeper into which pump is good for what kind of person, because I used Omnipod 5, I used this DYI system, I used Tandem T:slim X2, and like they might seem the same, but they are actually very different from from the way you manage and from the view of what they allow you to do, and how tricky or challenging it is, or how easy it is. So maybe we could do that. But just like for those reasons that I said, also because I'm kind of like a geek, I like to explore the systems and the algorithms. I just kind of prefer the pumps for me.
Do you have a preference between patch pump? So again, a pump that sits on the body. So right now, I think that's only Omnipod, and a tethered pump, so one with a cannula. Or does that not make a difference for you?
I think I haven't quite made my mind on this. I am now so lately I've been using Omnipod, which is a patch pump without a tube, and I'm leaning towards this solution, but I don't love everything about it. The main thing that bothers me about the patch pump, and I think I already said that somewhere in some videos about Omnipod, is when I sleep, it's about this size of like an AirPod case, maybe a bit smaller or a bit bigger. I don't know. It's not exactly, but it's about that size. And when you have something like this on your arm, on your abdomen, or on your back, or somewhere, it's just there, and you cannot really lie conveniently on that side of the body. So I ended up sleeping on one side of my body, and I like to switch to the other side. And when I have a pod there, it just bothers me. Like CGM doesn't bother me. I don't mind when like a small sensor on my arm, that doesn't bother me. But the pod is just too big to sleep on it. And that's like sounds like a very simple thing, but it's a big deal, because again, like I spend so much time in bed. So that's one thing I don't like about it. But overall, like being able to be connected to it and not have the cannula like everywhere all the time, it's just so convenient. When you do sports or go for a beach or whatever, it's just like so much easier with a patch pump, and it's also smaller than a conventional pump. So I would say I prefer Omnipod or like patch pump. Again, I'm not like this is not sponsored or whatever by Omnipod, but I just like patch pump probably be the case, but I'm not completely that I would say, okay, this is forever I will be using a patch pump. I see, benefits to having a tube pump as well.
Yeah. I mean, also with the patch pump, so I know there's an app now, so you don't have to bring a PDM with you. So that's kind of so PDM is the controller, right? So for the Omnipod, you wouldn't forget anything because your pod is on you, and you just need to have your phone in your pocket, which I guess everyone has anyway. So there's that option. So
But
I don't
I think that app is quite new. It used to be that
it is.
I had to carry a second device. But again, there's Omnipod 5, which is the version with algorithm that supports the CGM integration and everything like that. And then there is Omnipod Dash, which is an older version of Omnipod, which can be used in a DIY environment. So it would be able to use it with the Loop, which is the tool that you used in the past. And I actually like this better. I like Omnipod 5, but it's just the way I manage my blood sugar. I prefer to have to use Loop. Why am I saying that? I don't know. But again, like there's not only one Omnipod. There's not only one way to manage an Omnipod. There is the way of like the official commercial tool and the do-it-yourself version.
And I do think that's a good conversation for another chat. It's about the different algorithms because just because it's
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
a hybrid closed loop doesn't mean they do it the same way. But overall, I think I completely understand why your preference is insulin pumps. And I completely understand why it's a preference for a lot of people because it's pretty awesome. And I know most parents prefer that for their children because it gives I mean you don't have to give your child injections 7 times a day. I can see why that would be an upside also, especially for the hybrid closed loop systems for children. Brilliant. Maybe also for elders. I think it's the right tool for a lot of people. I also think that it's not the right tool for a lot of people, myself included, and that's okay. And I think that's if there's really something I want the listeners to take away is that these are options. And the most important thing is that we each find the options that's right for us. And that's right for us right now. So that means you, for example, are really good at shifting between what solution is right for you in the moment. So you said that when you go on vacation, sometimes you go back on MDI because that's just the right solution for you when you travel. And I think we tend to sometimes get we being us with diabetes tend to get a little bit stuck in the way that we manage and was like, this is what I do and this is the only way to manage. And I think, allowing ourselves the flexibility to switch between what's right for you right now is the way to go.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's challenging to switch from something that that you're kind of comfortable with, that is with you every day, to something different, because it requires like a mindset shift and it's just consuming extra energy. Like I like to make this change because I want to try a new system, but I know that it's taking a toll because I just have to be so much more involved because it's new. I need to learn something new. It will not go 100% smooth. There will be hiccups on the way. But then at the end, I might realize, okay, maybe this tool, after I learn how to use it, might be better for me, or might be better for me right now, or maybe not now, but at a different point in time. So I think what you said is really important. It's not about one thing is better than the other, but it's about what is better for you based on your lifestyle or your preference, and what is better for you right now, because your lifestyle can change, your preference can change. It sounds like we're like wrapping up, but I have a few things I wrote down about pump that I really like that I forgot to say.
Hey.
And I wonder if you know them. So like, actually, two things I will just say. I don't want to list too many, but two things that I really like about pumps is it's around dosing for meals. So one of them would be extended bolus, which means for certain meals like pizza, I think is the notoriously known example of meal that's like difficult to get your insulin right for a pizza because of the high carb and high fat content. And so with the pump, the way I manage it is I do an extended bolus, meaning I will deliver part of my meal dose before I start eating, and part of it maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours after I finish the meal, which will allow me to distribute that dose. I don't need to take 2 different doses. I don't need to interact with the pump twice. I just tell it, okay, give me half of the dose now and half of the dose in 2 hours, and I can sort of pre-program it, and then it happens automatically. I don't forget about it. And for certain meals or certain activities, this is really great. And second one, second one is a bit advanced, I would say, and I don't know if this is an official term, but I call it super bolus. When I have a food that's really high glycemic index food, something that will spike my blood sugar super fast, what I do is, okay, I count the carbs. Let's say a glass of orange juice. I will have a big glass of orange juice. I know it's, I don't know, 50 carbs. So, okay, if I put in my pump, I'm taking 50 carbs, the insulin will never be fast enough to catch up with the juice. Simply, the juice is so much faster than how the insulin is working. But what I do is I kind of borrowed a little bit of the basal insulin that the pump would be dosing after lunch, if that makes sense. And I say, okay, maybe 2 hours after lunch, I will take 2 hours from the basal. I put it now as a bolus. So normally for 50 grams of carbs of orange juice, I would take 5 units, but I'll take 7 units because I borrowed 2 extra units from that background insulin. But then for the next 2 hours, I will tell the pump, do not give me any background insulin. So I make the insulin work a little bit faster. I think it might be difficult. I don't know if I explained it well. It might be difficult to understand what I mean, but it's sort of like
Did a good job.
super bolus in a way. You're taking the insulin from the future and you put it now. And you cannot do it with the MDI. What do you think about this, Christel? Is it
I'd never
is it good enough?
strategy before. That's really interesting. I like it. It's interesting. No, it makes sense because you're getting the same amount of insulin, you're just moving it around. I'd say for the dual bolus that you're talking about, of course you can do that with an insulin pen as well. So often we'd say like do it 50 split or, figure out what works for you, right? So maybe you take 50% up front, then you take 50% an hour, 2 hours later to sort of take that second wave of glucose increase into account. Obviously, it's nicer when you just program it into a pump and then you don't have to think about it versus when you're on MDI, you have to be like, okay, is it time? And then take that second dose. I have found that not all insulin, some of the newer hybrid closed loop pumps don't allow for dual bolus because they kind of just, it's built into the system in the sense that the pump will automatically take care of any increases later on. I think that's the rationale. So you can't do a dual bolus there. You would have to go out of auto mode in order to do that. So the way that I usually do the dual bolus for me, again, back to the pizza example, I don't eat pizza that often, but other high fat, high carb meals is that I usually, if it's high fat, first of all, I'll add more insulin to the total dose to take the fat into account. I will usually do about half up front. When I then see my blood sugars start to climb, because I know that second wave is going to come, when I see that climb starting, I will take my second dose. Often that's about 2, sometimes up to 3 hours after my first dose. So that's not as proactive as I would like it to be. But on the other hand, I don't want to take my second dose already after an hour and then I'm going low. It's just annoying. So that's not how I deal with it.
That's how I do it too when I'm not on a pump. I wait for the climb to start from that fat thing. The thing I don't like about it is I need to be very involved. Like I need to wait. I need to check. I need to check here and there. Okay, did it start yet or not yet? Or should I take it now? That requires a lot of mental energy and like you need to be involved. And I'm not always involved. So I say like I just don't have that commitment. So that's why I like about the pump. You kind of program it and it's plus minus 2 hours, or at least I know for myself, depending on the meal. So I kind of like that. But of course, you can totally imitate it without a pump, without a smart system. You can still do it manually.
Well, I mean, again, if you're having it at night, it's really convenient that you can just put it into the pump and you can go to bed, right? And you don't have to wake up 2 hours later to do the manual injection. So again, it's back to there's so many good things and pros and cons about both the systems. We could just do a hybrid. That would be best, I think.
Yeah. When you go to bed, it sounded like you knew that I had a leftover birthday cake before I went to bed last night. I mean, there was a yeah. I really didn't want to eat it, but I ended up eating it
Was it good?
right before bed. It was really good, yeah. And then exactly the same thing happened that would happen with pizza. Birthday cake was the same impact.
Yeah, if it's a high cream one, definitely.
It was homemade, but still.
Yeah, fat is fat, regardless of where it's made. But we should also be able to do stuff like that, right? We should be able to have birthday cake if we want to, and we just need to figure out how we best handle it. And I assume your pump will handle it for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most of the time, yes. But when you said, some of the pumps cannot do the extended bolus in the automated mode, that's true, but it's not all of them. There's, I think, one or two that don't allow for it, and they claim that the system will take care of it, which is, in my opinion, not exactly the case because it's just not aggressive enough from my experience. But some of them still allow it. So I think, again, for another episode to break down the algorithms would be a great idea if someone is interested in that.
That'd be like a majorly geeky episode. Let's talk about algorithms.
So what else did we forget?
I don't think we forgot anything, to be honest. I think it's one of these things that's also going to hopefully continue to develop as insulin pumps get even better. My hope is that the insulin would get better. That would be amazing. Imagine if we had insulin pumps with like really, really rapid acting insulin that only lasts in the body like 2 hours.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Really cool. The other big thing that's that's on the horizon is the dual chamber pumps. So the ones that have both insulin as well as glucagon. So glucagon is what raises our blood sugars naturally, in the sense that it raises glucose from the liver and the muscles and all that good stuff. So basically, if your blood sugars start to go low, the pump could release a little bit of glucagon, raising your blood sugars, and then keeping that balance by itself. That is exciting in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
I mean, I heard about it. I haven't really made my opinion yet, I guess, on this. Honestly, I don't like. It's probably just me thing, but I don't like to take medication when I don't need to. So I feel like, taking glucagon is like just extra drug that I put in my body. And if I can take care of the low blood sugar like more naturally, it would probably be my preference. But I think from automation perspective, it's great when there is, insulin can only lower blood sugar, right? So if there is something that works in the opposite direction when needed, hopefully not too often, then it sounds like a great idea because it will make things just a lot easier for us. And we again, like, takes away a little bit of that work that we need to do will be done for us by this dual chamber pump. Yeah, I prefer always like the way that's like it requires the least medication involved, because when I don't need the medication, then I don't want to take it. But I can see why it can simplify things a lot. And I'm like super excited for the overnight pump, because for someone like you who is MDI hardcore fan, this can help forever.
I need a bumper sticker. Yep. MDI forever. Yeah, no, that's going to be really, really exciting. I know they're starting studies right now. I tried to get into the study, but they only wanted people with a high. Okay, and this is not conspiracy theory anything, but back to your point about pumps showing a decrease in A1C. They do. We also, if we look at the inclusion criteria for who's included into the test, people are usually, it's usually people with high A1Cs because they do need to show that they can lower their A1Cs. So I think for people who already have really well managed blood sugars, what they won't necessarily experience an even lower A1C. What they might experience on a pump is more sort of mental space freed up to do other things. And so I don't think it's just about lowering blood sugars when it comes to insulin pumps. It's also about, well, is this the right device for you to just live your life without having to think about diabetes 24/7? So that was just a little addition right there.
I agree.
This was a really, really good conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Thank you, Christel. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me again. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we will be able to do it again and again. I think we planned doing next episode on CGMs and how we use our CGMs. Hopefully that's still the plan, and we can do that maybe next week. And we also, I hope that our discussion gave some helpful insights to the people who are listening to this. So if you are one who is listening or watching and like the conversation, please let us know if you are on MDI or if you are on the pump, and also give us some feedback if you like this chat, if you something that you would like to see in the future. We'll definitely read the comments, and I would love to hear from you. And again, if you're on MDI, pump, we don't really care. We're happy to see you here. If you like this, subscribe to our channel on YouTube or wherever you are listening, and we will see you in the next episode. Ciao.
Bye-bye.